So in my last wrap-up video, you guys collectively decided by yourselves in the comments that I should stop doing my TBR challenges because I am mentally unfit to do them anymore. And honestly, I think you're right. So that's it, pretty much. I'm quitting TBRs. Hey guys, my name's Angus and today we're going to be going through my reading stats for July and wrapping up everything that I read last month. And that's it. There'll be no TBR reaping. There'll be no TBR at all. I'll get into in more detail a bit more about why I decided to stop doing TBRs because it wasn't just you guys commenting on my last video. I've just felt for a while that they are really prohibiting my reading, because I'm setting these goals that I don't really want to achieve and it's just not worth it. So I'll get into that more at the end. But for now, we're going to start with going through my reading stats for last month. So I read 9 books in July and a total of 2,917 pages, which is 1 book more than last month, but actually ends up being 20 pages less than last month. And it brings my total for the year to 64 books and 23,298 pages, which means I am 6 books ahead of my reading goal, and I only have 36 more books to read this year. As expected, I read 8 fiction books and only 1 non-fiction book, so 88% fiction and 12% non-fiction, which I'm okay with. I didn't plan on reading any non-fiction books this month, so I'm kind of content with the fact that I ended up picking up 1. Compared to last month, that is an improvement. I didn't read any non-fiction last month, so this is good. We're getting back on track, hopefully. I don't know, this graph is kind of pointless. I don't know, it's so predictable and it's always dominated by fiction, so let's just move on to the more interesting ones. My average star rating in July was 4.06 stars, which is actually a big jump up, a lot higher than usual. This month I didn't read anything below a 3-star rating, which has never happened before, so that's good. I read 2 3-star books, 1 3.5-star book, and 3 4 and 5-star books. So compared to last month, it's a big shift up. My average was a lot lower last month, like a 0.37 difference, which compared to my track record is quite big. I don't think I've ever had an average star rating above the 4-star mark, so that's really interesting. In terms of genre this month, I read 33% thrillers, 25% mystery, 20% literary, 10% middle grade, 6% contemporary, 4% fantasy, and 2% horror, which is almost not even worth reporting. 2% is nothing. Compared to last month, we can see that thriller is the top of both charts with almost identical percentages. But that's not really a surprise. Everyone knows that's my biggest genre. One thing that is really interesting this month is that I read no YA. I don't think I've ever done that before. I also read a bit more literary fiction this month, which is good. And that 4% fantasy and 2% horror, I'm pretty sure that's from the 1 novella that I read this month. That's why it's so tiny. I usually read a bit more horror, but this month I just didn't really pick up any horror books. For whatever reason, it was just that 1 novella. In terms of pace, I read a majority medium-paced books at 56%, and then 22% for both slow and fast-paced books. And compared to last month, that's a bit less distributed. I read a lot more evenly last month across slow and medium-paced books, and really actually fast too. It's only slightly lower, but this month my books were a majority medium-paced, which, I don't know, I guess it's just, there's not really any way to predict this, it just kind of happens. Looking at my reading moods, this month I read 29% mysterious, 22% dark, 18% adventurous, 13% reflective, 10% lighthearted, and only 8% tense. It's an interesting split here because if you combine mysterious, tense, and dark and compare it to lighthearted, reflective, and adventurous, it's almost like a 50-50 split, like the fun books and the dark, tense books. And I thought that was kind of interesting. There's quite a dichotomy there. But comparing that to last month, both graphs are quite similar. If you look at mysterious and dark and adventurous, they're all very similar percentages. Interestingly, the only different mood between the charts is lighthearted and emotional. All the other ones appear in pretty similar capacities in both charts, so I seem to be getting pretty consistent with my reading moods. And finally, my monthly reading habits graph. As you can see, this month was an average reading month compared to the previous ones, but that gap between the page count and the book count is getting closer together. I'm going to blame that this month on the novella I read, because that would have had a pretty dramatic effect on this graph. But yeah, we're past the halfway mark through the year, so hopefully we only go up from here. Alrighty, now that that's out of the way, let's go through everything that I read last month and just, do a little wrap up, because that's what we always do. So the first book that I read last month was The Mysterious Benedict Society by Trenton Lee Stewart. I actually picked this up because I watched the first episode of the show and I absolutely loved it. It's so well done, especially that first episode. It really grabs you. So at the time, that was the only episode that was out. So I was like, I picked this up and I sped through it. It's so good. If you're not familiar with this book, it follows 4 kids who have been selected to join the Mysterious Benedict Society through a series of elaborate tests that they had to do. These 4 kids join and then they're sent on super spy missions that kind of mix together logic puzzles, riddles, secret agent stuff, and also some really good discussions around ethical and moral issues. It's a really well-written book. It is quite long for middle fiction, but I still really enjoyed it. In this particular one, the team are investigating this secret school that is set up as a front for this thing called the emergency, which is this weird internalized panic that's spreading across the world because of these radio frequencies that are being sent out into people's brains. It's very complex, but it's a lot of fun. Very imaginative, very, very, very fun. I had so much fun reading this. So if you like middle fiction at all, give this a go. It's so much fun. And the show is great too. I gave this one 5 stars. It's definitely a new favorite for me for middle fiction, and I do want to read the rest of the series now, which doesn't usually happen with middle fiction. I usually find I read one book and that's enough for me. I get an idea of how the series is going to evolve and I don't need to experience it, but for this one I really want to see what happens next. The next book that I read was The Word is Murder by Anthony Horowitz. I picked this one up out of the blue actually, and I really, really enjoyed it. This is a really weird situation where it's like a cozy crime book, but it's like a self-insert author story. So Anthony Horowitz is the main character of this story, and he's an author in the book with his books are real in the book world, if that makes sense. So I'm sure you know Anthony Horowitz wrote the Alex Rider series, and this was his first, I think, adult series that he did. So in the book, the character of Anthony Horowitz references those books. It's very hard to get your head around, but it works so well. So like I said, this is a cozy crime story. The main mystery is about this woman who goes to this funeral parlor to plan her funeral, and then 6 hours later she's murdered. So it's this whole mystery of why did she plan a funeral and then be murdered? It wasn't a suicide, she was murdered. So it doesn't make sense. Did she know she was going to be murdered? Anyway, so Anthony teams up with this ex-cop who's investigating the case, who's hired Anthony to write a book about him, and Anthony's unwillingly accepted because he feels like he has to. It's a really, really weird situation, but it's actually a lot of fun, and the mystery is really well done. A really fun cozy crime read. I gave this one 4 stars. My only main issue was that the character of Hawthorne, who's the ex-cop who's investigating the case, is very, very grumpy, and it's very hard to like him. It gets better. But at the start, it was hard to get into. You do come around at the end, but that was my only big thing, was his character. But yeah, I gave this one 4 stars still. The next book I read was actually an advanced reader copy, and that was Velvet Was the Night by Sylvia Marina Garcia. This book comes out in September, I believe. I received an early copy from Hachette, Australia, so thank you so much, Hachette, for sending me this book. If you don't know, I'm a really big fan of this author. I really loved Mexican Gothic. It was her book prior to this. It came out last year. It was one of my favorites of the year. So I was really, really keen to dive into this one. Velvet Was the Night is a neo-noir situation about a secretary named Mate in 1950s Mexico City. A lot of political unrest forms this really cool backdrop to a missing persons case. Mate's neighbor goes missing, so naturally she wants to find out what happened to her, and she kind of gets swept up in this whole situation of disappearing people, cover-ups, agents trying to kidnap people. It's very interesting. My main thing is that you need to be aware that this is a slow book. It's a neo-noir, which generally means a slower paced, lower stakes situation. So don't go into this expecting it to be a really fun, fast-paced thriller. It's a lot of plotting around, and it's very well written, and as usual, the characters are fantastic. I always love Sylvia's characters. They're just one of the best parts of her writing, so I had a really good time with her characters. It is just a little bit slower, and it still doesn't live up to Mexican Gothic for me. I had a great time. I gave this one 4 stars, but it's just not quite as good as Mexican Gothic, so yeah, still really loved it though. And I can't wait for you guys to read it when it comes out in September. The next book that I read is actually another arc. The title is actually on the back of this one, but this is the cover of the arc. It's Animal by Lisa Taddeo. This is the much-awaited fiction debut of the author of 3 Women, which was a really big non-fiction release 2 years ago, I think. It was an instant bestseller, so this was her first fiction book, and oh my god, she really pushed the envelope with this one. This is so unsettling and disturbing, but so compelling. I would describe this as like if Patrick Bateman was a female character with like actual purpose and goals. Like a motivated Patrick Bateman. I feel like in American Psycho, Patrick Bateman is just kind of this carnal, not very driven character. He just does what he wants. Whereas Joan from Animal is like very, very driven and she knows what she wants. So she's a very compelling character. She does some very questionable things. This is almost like a revenge story, but not. It's about like power and sex and a lot of stuff. The plot is very hard to describe. It kind of meanders, but it's very compelling. So I don't really know how I'm going to sell this one to you, but this is one of my new favorites of the year. It's literary fiction. So if you like literary fiction that's a bit more gruesome and dark, I think you'll enjoy this. Joan is such an interesting character and the stuff that happens to her is quite horrible, but it's good. It's a really interesting study of a character. So yeah, I gave this one 5 stars. Very left of field, but I really enjoyed it. I feel like I always pick bad hair days to film these videos. Like looking at myself in the viewfinder while I talk and just like, what the hell is going on up here? Alrighty, and the next book that I read last month was When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. This is a crime thriller about the gentrification of a Brooklyn neighborhood with some really sinister and darker undertones of what's really going on. It's quite unsettling actually. I did find parts of this really unsettling. It's quite a well-written book. It's also kind of disguised as not a rom-com, but like a romance. There's a romance at the surface level, but there's a lot going on underneath that, which I really enjoyed. For me, I did have some issues with this book. I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars, simply because I had some issues with the pacing of this book. It felt like it ramped up and kind of fizzled out of nowhere. The third act is not very strong. I just felt as a whole, the book lacked a bit of heart. It felt very hollow. There was something missing there. It's a very, very interesting premise. Something was missing for me. So I had a good time. I was very unsettled, but ultimately, like, I hope for a little bit more. So I gave this one 3.5 stars. Alrighty, the next book that I read was the only nonfiction book I read last month, and it is The Dramatic Writer's Companion by Will Dunn. This, I'm not religious, but this is like my new Bible for writing. Oh my God. If you're a screenplay writer or a playwright, even like a fiction writer, this is so useful. This book pretty much is like it's exactly what it says it is. It's a writer's companion. It's a play-by-play kind of guide with exercises of how to develop your characters from start to finish. And I read this while I was developing some characters for a new short I'm working on. And I feel like by the end of it, I knew my characters better than I knew some of my lifelong best friends. So I'm really impressed, and I'll be using this for like everything I write now. It's so good, and you can use it the way that I did from start to finish to develop characters for your story, but you can also just use it. There's like a guide at the front of specific chapters that achieve specific things, and you can just flick to a certain page and get the exercise you need to overcome a certain issue you're having with your characters. It's just very good. I don't know if this book is still in print. I ended up getting it secondhand, just for a really good price, but it's pretty readily available secondhand. I gave this one 5 stars. This is like my new go-to thing for screenwriting, so I think that says it all. Alrighty, the next book that I read was French Exit by Patrick DeWitt, and I was pretty underwhelmed by this. I was really excited to read this. This is my first Patrick DeWitt book. I went into it expecting really, really good things and came out of it feeling like I read a decent book, but nothing that blew me away. The story basically follows a mother-son duo, Francis and Malcolm, who are like Manhattan socialites up until their money pretty much runs out. So they flee to France, and we're just kind of following them around. It's weird. It's like an oddball, very witty, funny story. But by the end of it, I was kind of like, why am I here? These two quite awful characters who are very privileged. I get it, but I was hoping for a bit more. So I'm a bit disappointed. I still enjoyed it. I still ended up giving it like a solid 3 stars. I just think I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have started here. Maybe I missed something. I'm still really keen to read The Sisters Brothers, which is probably his most popular book. But yeah, disappointed overall. Okay, and then I read Dial A for Aunties by Jessie Satano. This was, again, like French Exit, it was a solid 3-star read for me. I had fun with this, but nothing groundbreaking. Dial A for Aunties follows Madeline Chan, who works as a wedding photographer for her family business. She goes on a blind date and ends up accidentally killing her date, so she calls up her aunties to enlist them to help her cover up the murder and hide the body. This is all happening on the same weekend that the family business is doing their like most important wedding ever. So it's very high stakes, a lot of fun, a lot of running around just chaos. But overall, a little bit too shallow for me. The characters felt a little bit thin, especially Madeline, the main character. I feel like she was a little bit self-inserty. She didn't really have a third dimension. She was quite flat, but I still enjoy this. I had a lot of fun with the aunties. They're probably the best part of this book. And I wanted more of them. Even though they're in this so much, I wanted to see her aunties more. Yeah, a solid 3 stars for me. Alrighty, and the last book that I read last month was a novella, Prosperous Demon. This is quite a funny, satirical, snarky little novella about a very morally grey exorcist who he picks and chooses who he wants to help, and he's quite a fun character. I do quite enjoy morally grey characters, so I had a lot of fun with him, and I really liked the way the demons in this story were set up. They were very different to what you expect. They, like the main character, were quite snarky and had a bit more personality, which was fun. I've never seen that before, so I had fun with this. It's probably best to read this in one sitting. I did read it in 2 sittings, which I think kind of jagged the experience for me, but yeah, it was good fun. I gave this one a solid 4 stars, I think. Alrighty, so that's all that I read last month. That's it. It's weird because usually now I go into my TBR, but I'm not doing that anymore. So here's everything. I'm gonna put this down, and then we can have a little bit of a chat about why I'm not doing TBRs anymore. I'm making it sound like it's something crazy serious, but I just feel like it's fun to have a chat. Talk about how I'm feeling, because I'm feeling some things. So pretty much for over a year now, I've been doing my TBR jar challenges in some form or another. And it's just gotten to a point where you guys are right. And like, you can see it in my videos. I'm not enjoying it anymore. So I'm not gonna do it anymore. Just to be super symbolic, we're gonna empty the jars. I don't need them anymore. I don't want to look at them on my shelf because it does feel a little bit like a failed project, but also I feel like it would be more of a failed project if I kept doing something that I hate, because this is supposed to be about fun for me and reading is a hobby. It's not a job. So yeah, I think it's fair. I'm gonna have to clean all that up now, aren't I? I didn't think of that. So pretty much I am at a point where I just want to be able to, coming into August, be like, I'm just gonna go and see what books are out and pick up stuff that interests me. I don't wanna be tied down by that feeling that I have to read all of this stuff, because a lot of it I'm not interested in anymore. It's not worth it. I feel like this is going to improve my stats a lot as well, because I'm just going to read what I feel like reading, and mood reading is the best kind of reading. I don't want to have to come home and see my TBR stack sitting next to my bed just reminding me of how many books I'm supposed to get through by the end of the month. It's a lot of pressure, and it was fun for a time, but I'm at a point where I just feel like I'm over it, and I just want to like see a new release and go, oh, that sounds cool. I'm just going to pick it up and read it. Or even just see an old book that I own that I just can go, oh, okay, I kind of feel like reading that now. And I can, because I don't have any other tied down responsibilities with a TBR. So I've got there's so many interesting books as well that I just have in my head that aren't even new, that I'm just like, oh, I really want to read that, but I can't get to it yet, because I have my month planned out. So I think it's gonna be really interesting just to have a clean slate and read whatever I want. So yeah, that's pretty much it. At this stage, there's going to be no more TBR challenges either. I used to do the thing where I had a prompt to fill out each month. I feel like that was fun for a bit, but doing it on its own feels a bit hollow. So maybe some sort of TBR challenge will come out again in the future. But for now, I just need a little bit of time to read whatever the I want, honestly. I just want to feel a little bit more invigorated by reading, because I am feeling a slump coming on, and I have for a few months, of being like, I don't want to set aside time for reading because the books that I'm reading, I'm not 100% wanting to read. So I don't want to get into that. I don't want to have pressure around my reading. I just want to read what I want. So that's pretty much it. I just wanted to formally announce that I'm quitting TBRs. So that's it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want, you can let me know what you're reading, what you plan on reading this month. I'm not going to let you know what I plan on reading because there are no plans at the moment. I'm really excited to just pick up something and just see how it goes. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time in another video. Bye.